In this 25th anniversary year of September 11th, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation continues to honor America's heroes. Heroes like Fire Lieutenant Michael Wells, who was inspired by 9/11 to serve his community. After 14 dedicated years of service, he lost his battle with occupational cancer, leaving behind his wife, Katie, and their 3 children. Tunnel to Towers honored Lieutenant Wells by paying off the family's mortgage in recognition of his sacrifices. Donate $11 monthly and amplify your impact with a car or land donation. Go to T2T.org.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
It was back on January 20th, 2025, that President Donald Trump moved to significantly restrict birthright citizenship by signing Executive Order 14160, entitled Protecting the Means and Value of American Citizenship. The order directed federal agencies, including the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Social Security Administration, to stop recognizing automatic U.S. citizenship for children born in the United States to mothers who were either illegally present or here on temporary visas, such as a student visa or a work visa, a tourist visa, or a visa waiver program visa, if their fathers were not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. The policy was set to apply to births occurring 30 days after the executive order was signed, which would have been mid to late February of 2025. In essence, the executive order sought to reinterpret the 14th Amendment's citizenship clause by denying birthright citizenship to an estimated 250,000 U.S.-born children annually based on their parents' immigration status. Now, multiple federal courts quickly issued preliminary injunctions blocking the order nationwide. The lower courts ruled it unconstitutional and inconsistent with both the 14th Amendment and the existing federal statute 8 U.S.C. Section 1401. These injunctions remained in place throughout this ongoing litigation. But on June 30th of 2026, in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court struck down Executive Order 14160 as signed by President Trump, firmly upholding birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. This shocking ruling in Trump versus Barbera rejected the Trump administration's attempt to limit automatic citizenship for children born in the United States. Not surprisingly, Chief Justice John Roberts authored the majority opinion, and he was joined by Justices Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee, and Kajani Jackson Brown, with Justice Brett Kavanaugh concurring in the judgment, but dissenting only in part. The court held that children were born in the United States to parents are unlawfully or temporarily present, are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore are indeed citizens at birth. The decision reaffirms the text of the 14th Amendment's Citizen Clause that says, specifically, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. The decision draws heavily on the 1898 precedent, the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, which affirmed birthright citizenship for the children of Chinese immigrants. Roberts specifically emphasized that citizenship then and now was the right to have rights to freely participate in our political community. The framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every freeborn person in this land, and he said, we keep that promise today. This was quite a blow to the Trump administration. Dissenting, however, Justices Clarence Thomas, joined by Justice Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito, argued for greater executive and congressional flexibility on immigration-related citizenship matters. Gorsuch and Alito also wrote their own separate dissents. This ruling, unfortunately, preserves the status quo for hundreds of thousands of children born each year in the United States to parents who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. Birthright citizenship remains enshrined in the 14th Amendment based on this decision, distinguishing the United States from most countries that primarily follow the policy of jus sanguinis, citizenship by blood or descent. Narrow exceptions have long existed, such as for children of foreign diplomats. Now, in my opinion, the Supreme Court's decision rejecting President Trump's effort to limit birthright citizenship is more than just a simple legal defeat. It's a clarion call for common sense Americans who have long argued that America's immigration system has become untethered from both constitutional fidelity and plain old common sense. If conservatives respond with resignation rather than resolve, they will have misunderstood the significance of this very moment. If they respond with legislative action, constitutional advocacy, and an unapologetic defense of American sovereignty, this ruling may ultimately become the catalyst that reshapes the debate for the next generation. President Trump's executive order represented the most ambitious attempt in modern history to revisit the meaning of the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment, signed on the very first day of his second administration. The order had tried to direct the federal government to deny automatic citizenship to children born in the United States when neither parent was an American citizen or an unlawful permanent resident. It also applied to children whose mothers were unlawfully present or whose parents were in the country on temporary visas, as I said earlier, including tourist visas, student visas, temporary workers, and so on. The administration argued that the constitutional phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, had been interpreted too broadly for more than a century, and that the 14th Amendment was intended primarily to guarantee citizenship to the formerly enslaved after the Civil War, not to create an unlimited incentive for tourist citizenship, which is what we have today, and this torrent of unlawful immigration. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court has now rejected that interpretation and reaffirmed the long-standing understandings established by the 1898 decision in the United States versus Wong, holding that every child born on American soil is constitutionally entitled to citizenship regardless of the immigration status of the parents. As I said, the court was divided along liberal and conservative lines, but with Amy Coney Barrett, again, a Trump appointee, disappointing Trump supporters and conservatives with her decision. Clarence Thomas, who remains the most brilliant member of the court, argued in an extensive dissent spanning nearly 90 pages, arguing that the court's interpretation departed from the original public meaning of the Citizenship Clause and gave insufficient weight to the historical understanding of jurisdiction. But unfortunately, he and the other dissenters were in the minority. Collectively, the dissenters contended that the majority had elevated precedence over the original constitutional meaning and intent, and foreclosed an important constitutional debate that they believed renewed examination. For Republicans, this decision carries profound political implications for the long term, extending far beyond the courtroom today. It effectively places responsibility back where the Constitution often places difficult national questions in the elected branches of government. So if the judiciary will not reinterpret the Citizenship Clause, then conservatives must decide whether to impose congressional legislation, constitutional amendments, or broader immigration reforms designed to address the incentives that encourage unlawful entry into the United States. That's why this November's midterm elections are so very important. Without Republican majorities in the House and Senate, the idea of a legislative fix, a legislative restatement of these questions is sadly unthinkable. No nation can long endure if its immigration laws become merely advisory. Every sovereign state possesses not only the authority, but the obligation to determine who may enter, who may remain, and under what conditions citizenship may ultimately be acquired. Borders are not just arbitrary lines set upon a map. They are the visible manifestation of national sovereignty, much as the walls of your home distinguish the private sanctuary from public thoroughfare. When those boundaries lose meaning, the very concept of citizenship begins to erode. Reasonable people can disagree about whether birthright citizenship itself encourages unlawful immigration, but the evidence is debated. That is not disputed, is that organized criminal cartels exploit this weakness for border enforcement to facilitate human smuggling, narcotics trafficking, money laundering, and other transactional crimes. Federal authorities have long repeatedly warned that terrorist organizations and hostile foreign intelligence services seek opportunities to exploit weaknesses in our immigration system, but those threats exist independently of today's constitutional ruling and remain central concerns for national security policymakers. President Trump himself has consistently argued that America's immigration system had been manipulated by sophisticated criminal organizations that profit from porous borders while placing extraordinary burdens upon law enforcement, schools, hospitals, and yes, taxpayers. His administration has maintained the strong border security, aggressive deportation of criminal aliens, expanded interior enforcement, and strict eligibility standards for immigration benefits, representing essential components for restoring public confidence in the rule of law. Although today's ruling forecloses one constitutional avenue, it leaves intact many other executive and legislative tools available to future administrations. Republicans and Trump supporters should resist the temptation today towards despair. Sometimes it's difficult. The American constitutional system has repeatedly witnessed controversial judicial decisions become the beginning rather than the conclusion of political movement. For example, the abolitionists did not surrender after the Dred Scott decision. The civil rights movement did not cease after the incorrectly decided Plessy versus Ferguson. So constitutional interpretations evolve through public debate, legislation where permissible, constitutional amendments when necessary, and the democratic process itself. The broader lesson here is unmistakable. If common sense people believe that birthright citizenship should be narrowed, then they must persuade the American people rather than relying exclusively upon executive action, in this case, an executive order. They must build a historical case, a constitutional case, and a moral case capable of sustaining legislative reform by the other branch of government. And if necessary, the extraordinary demanding process requires the amendment to the Constitution itself. Well, America has always welcomed lawful immigration. Indeed, generations of immigrants have enriched this country beyond measure. My own people came here from both Italy and Hungary, so we are a nation of immigrants. Yet, immigration without ordinary legal process ceases to be immigration in the traditional American sense and instead becomes administrative chaos. Citizenship, in my view, is the highest civic honor a republic can bestow. It should neither be trivialized nor detached from the enduring principle of national allegiance, constitutional order, and the rule of law. Today's ruling, which I found shocking but not totally unpredictable, represents a significant judicial setback for President Trump and for those common sense citizens who supported his constitutional interpretation. It is not, however, the final chapter in America's constitutional debate. It is merely the latest chapter in a constitutional conversation that will continue whenever citizens remain determined to preserve both the generosity and the sovereignty of the American people. On the same day that the Supreme Court issued this ruling, the news was not all bad from the Supreme Court. They did hand a major victory to fairness in women's sports Tuesday, upholding laws in Idaho and West Virginia that keep biological males out of female athletic competition. In a 6-3 ruling, the court overturned lower court decisions that had sided with transgender athletes challenging those state protections. It was Justice Brett Kavanaugh writing for the majority that states may preserve women's and girls' sports for biological females only, ruling that such laws do not violate Title IX of the Constitution.